All right, we are live. And welcome to another episode of The Jeff Show. Saw this. So yeah, how long has it been since I've just ran? Sorry, I'm like super conscious right now because I'm trying to record this as a podcast and do a show at the same time. And I'm like not thinking my synapses are not firing in the right kind of way. So please excuse me. Okay. The 90s were a magical time. It was a time where, we were getting a lot of stuff that was like sort of like remade from the 60s. There was a lot of things were being remade. We think about remakes really in the early 2000s and in the 2010s and yada, yada, yada. But remakes were happening in the 90s as well, just maybe not like in the same way. Like we had like the Brady Bunch was being remade. Batman and Robin is essentially an adaptation of Batman 66. You have The Shadow. You have these properties, these IPs, whatever you want to call them, sort of being reimagined. But along with that, you're also seeing all this really like original, imaginative stuff. We're starting to see comics being adapted for the first time. Lots of different comics. And, again, I can't bury the lead because the title of the podcast, you already know what this is about. Matter of fact, wrong on me for not having the Wikipedia primed and ready to go as well. We're going to need the Wikipedia for what we are about to talk about. Because I believe The Rocketeer was also based on a comic book that's right from 1982 as a backup. As a backup feature in issues number 2 and 3 of Mike Grell's Star Slayer. So The Rocketeer started as a comic book that got adapted in the same way that The Shadow was like a radio play, or The Phantom. These things kind of like got revamped for the 90s. But before Blade, Blade sort of brought about the beginning of the modern Marvel film, like where the executives were like, hey, wait a minute, these superheroes can make us a lot of money. Every once in a while, you'd get something that would sort of burst through, and it was like the closest thing that we would get to a superhero film. You had your Batman movies, but Batman was like a flagship A1 blue chip superhero. So of course that's going to get adapted and makes sense when, really the modern superhero film or the semi-modern superhero film goes back all the way to 1978 with Superman the movie, Richard Donner. So people could kind of wrap their minds around this idea of like, oh yeah, Superman the movie. Oh yeah, Batman. But, something like Iron Man or Spider-Man or in Captain America, like, oh, wow, I can't even imagine that being like, adapted as a big screen blockbuster film. There were some film, you had like The Punisher. You had like The Punisher, the 1989 Punisher with Dolph Lundgren as the Punisher. You had that weird Captain America film that came out with the Red Skull, and it starts at the beginning in World War II, and like, the Red Skull like gets turned into the Red Skull because there's like this really grotesque red rat thing. I don't know. But you'd also get, like I said, we would, I would try to imagine what a superhero movie like would and could be. And I would use real life tangible examples as, sort of like templates for me to project my fantasy onto. And one of those was The Rocketeer. So, I loved The Rocketeer growing up. Phenomenal film. Apparently it was a flop. In my mind, it was nothing but a success and something that I always truly enjoyed. And when I thought in my mind, like, what would a big budget Captain America movie look like? It would be The Rocketeer. So, when I used to, talk with my friends and, talk hot takes, and this is pre 2011. It's a very important year, very, very important year. Pre 2011, you know, I would always be like, oh my God, like, could you imagine a Rocketeer like film that, you know, could you imagine a Captain America like film that, you know, was like the Rocketeer? You know what I mean? That was always the parallel that I would draw. You know, I'd be like, imagine if the guy who did the Rocketeer did a Captain America film. And then the weirdest thing happened. The most surreal thing, I've talked about this before in various different ways. The guy who did the Rocketeer film did the Captain America film in 2011. And that's why I say pre-2011, because pre-2011, I could only fantasize. And then 2011 comes, and it's like, whoa, we actually have a Captain America film by the dude who did the Rocketeer. There's no better person. And he, of course, you know, Joe Johnston, he knocks it out of the park. He also directed Jurassic Park 3 and Jumanji and a bunch of other stuff. He's a phenomenal director, Joe Johnston. So as I said, but what was the Rocketeer? And, you know, what primed me to do this episode in the first place? I saw this article on the Nerdist by Kyle Anderson called "The Rocketeer Deserves So Much Better," and I couldn't agree more. I haven't even read the article. I decided I was going to read it blind, you know, live in the stream right now, which is the plan. That was the whole plan all along, and we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. But I wanted to temper the reading of this article by discussing how much I feel like Rocketeer was a proto big budget Captain America film that we got in the 90s. We didn't even know what we were getting. Here's this guy with a jetpack fighting Nazis, and he's fighting this big bad who's like, you know, Timothy Dalton is just a delicious bad guy, in the same vein as like somebody dastardly, like something that Tim Curry would play, but it's played by Timothy Dalton instead, who really like embodies and channels the Errol Flynn style, you know, hero of the 30s who's secretly a double agent. Spoilers if you haven't seen The Rocketeer, a double agent Nazi spy. Oh wow, you know. And you know, I rewatched it over the summer. We you know, during COVID couldn't go to the movies, so we were projecting movies on a screen in the yard. And one of the films we projected was, of course, The Rocketeer. And I'm watching it, and you know, I don't know if slow is the right word, but it's, you know, it's very pulp. It's a pulp noir. It's much more of a pulp noir than it is a superhero film. And maybe that's why it didn't do so well at the box office. The moments of herodom, the moments of heroism are phenomenal and, you know, just spectacular. But they are sort of separated and somewhat sandbagged from time to time by this glut of like pulp noir plot and running around and espionage. And we need the MacGuffin device happens to be a jetpack that makes the superhero a superhero. You know what I mean? It's pretty freaking cool when you think about it. It's a pretty cool concept. But some quick history about the Rocketeer before we read this article about the Rocketeer deserving better. The character first appeared in 1982 and is an homage to the Saturday matinee serial heroes from the 1930s through the 1950s. I'm reading this off of Wikipedia. I might as well just pull it up right now. There we go. You can see here, this is a more recent, this is from 2011 by Alex Ross. It's weird illustration for Alex Ross, who normally does much more. He does, like, have you ever seen the Flash Gordon stuff that he does? He did Kingdom Come for DC. The Rocketeer's secret identity is Cliff Secord, a stunt pilot who discovers a mysterious jetpack that allows him to fly. His adventures are set in Los Angeles and New York in 1938, and Stevens gave them a retro nostalgic. Stevens is the guy who invented it. A retro nostalgic feel, influenced by the King of the Rocketman and Commando Cody movie serials, both Republic Pictures, and pinup diva Betty Page. The character was adapted into the 1991 Walt Disney Pictures film The Rocketeer, directed by Joe Johnston. So the plot is, it's 1938 Los Angeles. Cliff Secord, a local racing pilot and barnstormer. I don't know what that means. What's a barnstormer? Let's look that up. Oh, barnstorming was a form of entertainment in which stunt pilots performed tricks either individually or in groups called flying circuses, devised to impress people with the skill of pilots and the sturdiness of planes. It became popular in the United States during the Roaring '20s. Okay, did not know that. So he was a barnstormer. He discovers the rocket pack hidden by two gangsters fleeing the police. When he decides to take it for a spin, his life is turned upside down in more ways than one. No pun intended. So it appeared, like I said, it appeared in 1982 as backup feature in this other book called Star Slayer from Pacific Comics. 2 more installments appeared. On February 28th, 2009, IDW Publishing announced a hardcover collecting the entire series for the first time. So I didn't know that either. So then they did another one, an anthology called The Jetpack Adventures, and that was by IDW in 2014. Pretty cool stuff. I guess that really covers that. Let's go to the article now. So this is what inspired the whole this show in the first place. The Rocketeer Deserves So Much Better by Kyle Anderson, April 5th, 2021. This is from the Nerdist. In the post, here we go. They talk about Tim Burton's Batman. Like I said, I'm reading this blind, everybody. I'm reading this blind. Ready? In the post-Tim Burton's Batman days of the early 90s, it seemed like studios everywhere were searching for their own comic book heroes to send up to the big screen. Most of them ended up being characters from or set in the 1930s for some reason. Right. Another one that I totally forgot about, Dick Tracy. Warren Beatty did this big budget, beautiful Dick Tracy adaptation. Al Pacino plays Big Top, Big Head or something. With all the Dick Tracy characters. It was perfect for a movie adaptation, and it's like bright, beautiful colors and crazy set design. I haven't watched Dick Tracy in a while. It's a phenomenal comic adaptation. Totally check that out. Warren Beatty stars and directs it. And it's very much in the same vein as The Rocketeer. As a matter of fact, that would be the perfect double feature. I would guys. But yeah, so they're saying, in the 90s, you got Dick Tracy, The Shadow, and The Phantom. Old studio heads love themselves some pulp comics, I guess. That's what he's saying. That's what this guy, Kyle, is talking about. Those movies are fun enough. But in 1991, we got a movie that seemed tailor-made for continued adventures. And it's so true. Full of heart, humor, and Nazi-punching action. We're, of course, talking about The Rocketeer. And that's the other thing. That's the real crime about The Rocketeer, is that this thing was totally destined to be a franchise. The movie works as like a singular contained story, but clearly at the end they leave room for, more adventures if one wanted to take them. And it's just a shame that we didn't get that. It never went down because it performed so poorly, as it says here. Despite some good reviews, The Rocketeer was a box office bomb. But as the movie's 30th anniversary approaches, now we must give it its heroic due. We're here to explain why it holds up and why it absolutely deserved better. The Rocketeer began, we already read this part. The Rocketeer began as a comic series in 1982 by author-artist Dave Stevens as a homage to the 1930s adventure series. Sounds like he might have written that or taken that directly from the Wikipedia. Kind of like Indiana Jones. In fact, The Rocketeer's director, Joe Johnston, worked as a VFX artist and director for the first 2 indie movies, which makes perfect sense because again, in between these moments of like pulp noir, the pulp noir stuff that's going on, all the adventure action pieces totally feel like they're ripped from the DNA of Indiana Jones. It makes perfect sense. And frankly, Steven Spielberg, had they not, it's like, oh, maybe they tried to get Steven Spielberg, but they couldn't. Joe Johnston, again, wouldn't have it any other way. But, you could totally imagine Steven Spielberg doing The Rocketeer and just blowing it out of the water had they been able to do it. I mean, look, you can see this little picture within picture, the beautiful sets. He's gliding on the plane right there. It's just wonderful, truly wonderful. I love that. I love that leather jacket thing that he wears with the buttons. It's kind of like the Western look a little bit. In any case, yeah, and the Nazi pack, the pack was designed, or no, you know what it was? It was designed by Howard Hawks, and the Nazis wanted it for the war effort. They wanted to make these flying SS soldiers. And the Errol Flynn character is trying to get the pack and the plans. And then you have this Rondo type guy with the big face, that mug. Oh my God, it's phenomenal. I don't know why. I don't know what they call him, but he's kind of like a Rondo sort of character, like, the Rondo Awards. So Disney had initially wanted to set the movie in contemporary times. Johnston argued to keep it set in the 30s, which was, I agree, pure genius. The time period of pre-World War II Hollywood jumps off the screen in The Rocketeer. Just like the comics, the movie places its hero, stunt pilot Cliff Secord, played by Billy Campbell, great casting, at the center of a much larger plot. And it's a complicated one, too, involving Tommy gun-toting gangsters, experimental science, and the actual worst villains in modern history, the Nazis. People like Indiana Jones, they ought to have loved The Rocketeer. And, another like a shame that Indiana Jones and The Rocketeer have never teamed up. Like, we've never had that team up. I would love to see that happen. You could totally imagine the adventures of The Rocketeer and Indiana Jones taking on the Nazis, who have some sort of, occult artifact and yada, yada, yada. You could even throw Hellboy in there. Could you imagine a three-way crossover between Hellboy, Indiana Jones, and The Rocketeer? It would just work. I mean, there's your a superhero team if I ever heard one. And throw in the Phantom and the Shadow. Oh my God, we're getting carried away. Might as well throw in the whole kitchen sink. Why not? In addition to getting the time period just right, The Rocketeer also brings in allusions to real life people. These are references I never understood as a kid, but now as an old movie dork, they feel so obvious. And I'm sure he's about to mention Howard Hawks right now. The villain, he talks about Neville Sinclair is the name of the villain. Great name too, Neville Sinclair. That's the Timothy Dalton character. Is a matinee idol, an adventure hero in the vein of Errol Flynn, right? Captain Blood from the 30s, His henchman, the gargantuan Lothar, is just straight up supposed to look like the distinctive looking character actor Rondo Hatton. Hatton is most famous for a character called the Creeper in the 1940s movies like House of Horrors and The Brute Man. Yeah, and then they named an awards after this Rondo guy. And yeah, it's just so well done. What a great nod. It's just such a great nod. And I've never seen those old movies. Yo, what's up, yeet bitch? How you doing? That team, he says, that team makes my loins froth. Me too, man. Me effing too. I agree. As for real people, we see actors saying screen legends in Clark Gable and W.C. Fields in the South Seas club scene. Right, that's that where they have the giant clam, and Jennifer Connelly is doing the song and dance, which was very popular back then. You go to the club and you'd have the gorgeous singer singing on the stage. They do it with Madonna in Dick Tracy as well. She's that sort of archetype as well. Which is some fun buff stuff, but your big real person appearance comes in the form of film producer, aviation genius, and known weirdo, not Howard Hawks, Howard Hughes, Howard Hawks, as played by Terry O'Quinn, who does, he's just phenomenal. And he's also like a pseudo Howard Stark, Tony Stark's father, which we would kind of see in Captain America, the First Avenger. In the story, Hughes is an inventor of the rocket pack and is behind the effort to get it away from Sinclair and the Nazis. Eventually, Hughes is also the provider of all the plot details. He shows our heroes a truly amazing German propaganda cartoon about what would happen if the Third Reich had the rocket for themselves. This should be so much longer because it's so awesome. It is. It's a great scene. Such a memorable, fun way to they raise the stakes. They let us know what's at stake. The Nazis could, when the war is brewing. It's 1938. The World War II is not erupted yet, but should the Nazis get a hold of this jetpack, it could just spell certain doom for everybody. So it's a big deal. It's really a big deal. But all of this is just fun window dressing. What makes The Rocketeer so endlessly enjoyable comes down to the characters. Cliff Secord is your typical good-hearted lunkhead who just can't seem to tell his girlfriend Jenny exactly how he feels. Nailed it. Right, this writer nails that perfectly. That's exactly what's going on, and it doesn't have to. That's all you need. You know what I mean? That's all you need for your hero in the situation. I love that they called him a good heart. He is. He's a lunk. He's a bit of a lunkhead. Even though he's impossibly handsome, despite the Brendan Fraser hair drapes, he feels like an underdog. And maybe he's a little too good looking. Maybe that's his problem. As a matter of fact, Brendan Fraser would have been perfect for this role, because even though Brendan Fraser does have like a square jaw hero look that he would embody in stuff like The Mummy, he also is kind of a goofy doofus. And you can imagine that The Rocketeer, being a stunt pilot and dashing, also is kind of a goofy doofus. Another person who would have been great as The Rocketeer would have been Bruce Campbell. I could totally see Bruce Campbell with some wisecracking, stunt driving, goofy slapstick going on, just doing what he does best as he straps a jetpack on his back, He's so naive about anything but piloting, and that's the truth, man. That is the truth. When it comes time to navigate the skies, Cliff is just like, he could do it like from the back of his hand. But when it comes to just like simple things, like not simple, I guess they're kind of complicated too. But when it comes to stuff like dating, he's just like, he's a dunce. He can navigate the airplanes, but not the women. That did not come out right. I take that back. Let's pretend I didn't say that. Wow. You know what I mean? Navigate relationships with women. That's what I meant to say. We side with Cliff because he has dreams. Who among us hasn't had dreams? Remember dreams? I remember dreams. I still got them. I got plenty of them. That's why I'm here talking to you. By the way, if you're just joining us, please make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Check this podcast out. But this will also be on Spotify and all your podcast places. I'm not really into it tonight. The Rocketeer's mix of Alfred and Lucius Fox is Peevy, the crack engineer played by Alan gosh darn Arkin. I don't know, Lucius Fox, who he's there when he's referring to Lucius Fox, who's from Batman. He's from he's one of the CFOs of Wayne Enterprises or whatever. He's really referring to Morgan Freeman in the Christopher Nolan universe. Was it played by Morgan Freeman? Was Morgan Freeman in that? Oh my God, am I making that up? Who plays Lucius Fox? Now I got to check. Wow, I'm going to feel like a real dummy if I'm wrong about that. Who plays The Dark Knight? Let's find out. Wow. Am I just like, am I just not, I'm not firing up. Oh, he says, yeah, Yeet Bitch says he was. Okay. Yes. Okay. I was like really scared there for a minute. I was like, am I just like not thinking correctly today? Yeah, Lucius Fox, Yeet. I don't know if you agree with me or not. But I don't think Peevy works he's not Lucius Fox, man. He's not. He's definitely a little bit of Alfred. He's like, but he's also like an absent-minded professor. He's like, he's a crack engineer, but he's just kind of like, I guess Lucius Fox works for the example if you're thinking about the Nolan Batman movies, but not really. From an overarching character perspective, he's not a Lucius Fox. That's something I disagree with. I'm going to go ahead and say Alan Arkin is the best thing in any movie. I don't know about that. Literally, movies he's not even in, he's the best. Here, he has the movie's best line, like a hood ornament. I guess he's referring to the fin, because that's part of the Rocketeer's problem. He puts on a helmet, or he gets the jetpack, but they can't get, and it's the same thing with, I think Howard Hughes talks about this too. They have problems with, steering. They can't navigate with the jetpack on. So to fix this, they figure out if he puts a fin on his helmet, then he can navigate the airways, the skyways with with the fin on his head. And I think that's what he means when he says like an ornament. Jennifer Connelly's Jenny is one of those too good for our hero, but she still doesn't care girlfriend characters that could feel really dated in 2021. But she also ends up being the most important character, the one whom the entire plot hinges. She's the one who learns Neville Sinclair's a Nazi. She's not anywhere near the kind of movie heroines comic book movies have these days, but she has far more agency than the typical damsel. Once again, totally agree. She absolutely has agency in this film, and it's because of the information that she learns. She's an actress, and she's like in the background, and then Neville takes an interest in her. I forget why. I know I just watched this movie over the summer. I already forgot. So she's kind of like, between Cliff and Neville, and he's like a handsome movie star who's kind of like seducing her for the wrong reasons. The movie really does a great thing by focusing on fascism and Nazis as the ultimate evil. It's not merely that Neville Sinclair is a greedy a-hole. He's also a traitor and a spy. At the end of the movie, even Eddie Valentine's mob, this is a great scene. You got the feds and you got the mob are both, about to go up against each other with their Tommy guns and yada, 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 with the jetpack, and Cliff and the jetpack and Jenny are in the middle. And then all of a sudden, Neville comes out of nowhere with his Nazis, and suddenly the mob, Paul Sorvino plays the mobster, realize that they've been working with the Nazis, and they team up with the feds. So the feds and the gangsters, who are sworn enemies in any sort of fiction, right, suddenly, become, allies against the Nazis. It's such a great scene. And there's a giant shootout, and it's wonderful because you just see feds and gangsters teaming up to just kick some Nazi ass. And then, of course, the big Led Zeppelin balloon comes, and they climb up the ladder, yada, yada, yada. So, yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. The mob who have been a thorn in our hero's side for most of the movie turn against Sinclair when they figure out his true aim. Hell, the feds and the gangsters even team up in the final shootout because they're fighting Nazis. Everybody hates Nazis. It's great. It really is great. It's a lesson that we need more of today. And what's left to praise but the action? The Rocketeer set pieces have tons and tons of energy and don't rely on the frenetic cutting of modern movie action flicks. Dude, this writer is just nailing it. It's so true. It's so true. However, I stand by what I said about like these action sequences are spaced out too much. Like the pacing is clunky. The pacing is a little clunky. At least for most, it's about 100 minutes, and it really could stand to lose about 10 of those minutes, maybe even 15 of those minutes. And then, once, the last 30 or 40 minutes, it really just cooks. The whole thing cooks. It just really picks up. And it just takes a while to really, truly, get going. And that's part of the Rocketeer's, folly and why it failed, even though it didn't deserve to fail at the box office. The car chase between the feds and the mob, the airplane stunts, the admittedly silly rocket journey through the club, the shootout between the Nazis and the feds and the mob, the explosive finale above the Nazi Zeppelin. They're all big classic sequence where you know exactly what's happening and to whom. And again, it could only, be helmed by a dude who worked on something like Indiana Jones. So there you go. The Rocketeer deserved a much bigger reception when it came out because it did everything right by the source material and adapting it to a larger family audience. It kept the iconic bits, cut out the more salacious elements. It represents maybe the best job Disney has ever done at modifying without gutting. Yeah. And Joe Johnston proved so adept at this time period that he was pretty much the best and only choice to direct Captain America, the first Avenger, 20 years later. If only we lived in a world where the Rocketeer spawned a series of movies where he became as big as Batman or the Indiana Jones. But alas, it was not meant to be. At least we still have the first movie. Happy 30th to the Rocketeer. Kyle Anderson is the senior editor for the Nerdist. You can find his film and TV reviews on the Nerdist.com. And, like, again, like, the dude is spot on when it comes to this with everything that he said, pretty much. And it's a shame that we didn't get a franchise. We deserved a franchise and we didn't get it. So, and the other thing that's really great. Well, sorry, I hit a pothole here. Yes, totally hit a pothole. The other thing that is really spectacular to bookend this conversation is how it captured a comic book nerd's imagination, or just anybody who's into comics. Because again, in a time where you couldn't imagine a big budget sprawling epic like Captain America the First Avenger, you'd go, oh, if they made it, it would have to be like the Rocketeer. And that's what like the Rocketeer was. You know what I mean? In the same way, and I know this is going to sound really dumb now. It sounds really dumb post 2015 when we got Ash versus the Evil Dead on Stars. Hey, what's up, Mr. Red? How you doing? Thanks for joining us. This sounds really stupid, but at a time, when Sam Raimi was done with horror completely and wasn't going to return to the world of Evil Dead, Drag Me to Hell came out. And, obviously it has nothing to do with Evil Dead, but in a weird kind of way, I always kind of thought of Drag Me to Hell as like Evil Dead 4, like a spin-off of Evil Dead 4. And it was the closest thing we were going to get to the elusive Evil Dead 4, primarily that scene at the end in the cemetery. That's what we had that's all we had as fans of that fandom. And so that's what the Rocketeer was in the same way. It's like, until we got that Captain America film, all we had was the Rocketeer. And what a thing to have. It's not, Mr. Red says, Rocketeer, I'm this movie really awesome. I don't know what that means, but hey, I'll take it. I'll agree with that. Yeah. So if there's something that you in particular want me to talk about in the future, let me know. I will totally do it. Couple of updates real quick. Just finished the third tape of the Bobby Steele interview. So glad to have that almost finished, almost done, so I can move on to the Joey Image interview. The Screaming Jay Hawkins video, still just working away at it. Can't wait to unveil it. Hope it's going to be, everything and all this and more, yada, yada, yada. And stay tuned for the Devilock pageant next week. This was a really short episode. It feels good to just sort of get in and get out. I don't have to, go for hours and hours and hours. This is what I used to do. I used to try and do this every single day and just do it for like 30 minutes a day. That's all you need to do. So if you guys find any articles that are interesting that we could talk about on here, send that to me as well. Mr. Red says, excuse me, what I meant to say was Rocketeer. I remember this movie and it was really awesome and still is. Dude, you and me both, man. It's a great friggin' film. And you know what makes me want to revisit? I want to revisit Dick Tracy and I want to revisit The Shadow, Alec Baldwin. I think it's on HBO Max right now. So I'm gonna try and check that out. In any case, Mr. Red, have a wonderful Friday. Yeet bitch, I think you might have left, so you have a wonderful Friday as well. I'll be broadcasting sooner than later, I'm sure. Until I see you next time, that's peace and hair grease.